So welcome back. Now, the second half of the day, we will explore the impact of Christianity on Chinese material culture. So we will follow the same format as well, 4 presentations with a tea break in between. And after that, we will invite all the panelists back all the speakers back for a panel discussion as well. So I'd like to introduce the moderator for the next 4 presentations. He is Dr. Kevin Lam. So please join me to welcome him on stage, please.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the second panel of our Faith and Forms Forum. So in the morning, we look at Christian art in context, as the panel is called. We look at things happening in Beijing. We look at things happening in Hunan. We looked at also architecture in Hong Kong. But in this panel, what we are going to do is to focus more on objects. And I think that's also a subject befitting to a conference happening in a museum. So for this panel, we are going to look at different aspects of material culture. So we will have experts on textiles, we have an expert on porcelain, we have experts on cloisonné. We will also have an expert talking about specific sculpture on the facade of in Macau. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker of the panel today, Dr. Maria João Ferreira from Museum of Roque from Portugal. Her title is Faith, Devotion, and Business, Chinese Textiles in Christian Context in the Early Modern Period. Thank you, and the floor to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm short, so I just would like to start thanking Dr. Kevin Lam and his ACM Museum staff for their kind invitation to be here today. It's my first time in Singapore, so I couldn't be better with this audience. In the second half of the 16th century, liturgical vestments represented the institution of the Catholic Church that had recently emerged from the Council of Trent, defending a fully triumphant ideology. They were paradigmatic testimonies of this spirit, promoting luxury and wealth as an expression of its strategy and solemnity. To this end, the Church undertook an intense campaign to attract the faithful, in the context of which the concept of sacred space in a scenic way and a new liturgical approach became fundamental, with textile vestments and ornamental programs being a vital part of the process. In Asian missionary contexts, Western missionaries, above all the Jesuits, implemented the Council of Trent's propagandistic stand that utilized art as a means of increasing and stimulating people's faith in the Church and its doctrine. To this end, lavish devotional objects such as these were used together with painting, music, candles, flowers, perfumes, dances, and even theatrical performances, especially during processions, with the aim of sensually enhancing the rituals and arousing pious emotions in those present. In this way, they hoped to edify the Christians and attract the natives whom they wished to convert. This was a strategy whose echoes resonate from different parts of Portuguese patronage along the 16th and the 17th centuries, all of them highlighting the importance of these external devices as the most effective means of attracting and impressing non-Christians. But what were these textile ornaments and vestments in these Christian contexts, and how were they obtained? In the early years of missionary campaigns in Asia, the clergymen brought some of the much-needed liturgical textiles with them, or had access to those sent from Portugal via Goa. But this was a slow and inefficient process, given the growing number of new missions, churches, and convents spreading across the vast territory of the Portuguese patronage, which stretched from the east coast of Africa to Timor, Macau, and Japan. In response to the constraints felt on the ground, local non-Christians filled the ever-growing demand and steady supply of these indispensable ornaments. Such was the case with Chinese artisans, which soon became the main suppliers. Between 1557 and 1560, at a time when the establishment of Macau had just been approved, the Japanese mission was in its infancy, and the Chinese mission was still a long way off. News from Goa was already reporting the combined use of Chinese textiles and European tapestries and ephemeral decorations, decorative ensembles of St. Paul's College during some of their religious and scholarly festivities. Moreover, while some of these artifacts were typically Chinese, associated with the cults dedicated to ancestors and natures, others had Christian nature. Only 2 years later, we find news of a similar solution to that in Goa in the company's church in Macau, which were very well furnished with many rich cloths from China and Flanders, this on the occasion of the Holy Week celebrations. As Govin Alexander Baylis observes, in hopes of selling to the Christian market, non-Christian Chinese artists showed no hesitation in copying Christian imagery in a Western manner, as did Hindu sculptures in Goa. The Chinese craftsmen knew their market. A mere 4 years after the foundation of the first permanent European settlement in China at Macau, Chinese artisans already demonstrated a highly sophisticated knowledge of the specific iconographic needs of these foreigners, end of quote. Yet, curiously and strangely at the same time, despite all the attention that has been paid to the growing dissemination of Chinese Christian popular imagery, namely painting, engraving, and illustrated books, we are not aware of any studies that have considered these extraordinary objects and their role as visual mediators in the establishment of Christianity in China. Even Bailey, despite recognizing this reality, limited himself to pointing out as one intriguing example an embroidered satin hanging depicting Saint Anthony of Padua. And there's another in Vienna that has another saint, and it's never mentioned. The silence surrounding these ecclesiastical textiles seem even more incomprehensive in view of the functions and programs on display, which not only align with those of Christian painting and engraving, but also use a medium that is perfectly in tune with Chinese cultural and artistic traditions, such as embroidery. This was, after all, one of the most popular means of textile adornment in China, which cut across all social strata and had the added advantage over engraving of detail, polychromy, and texture. Until a few years ago, the lack of knowledge of a sufficiently expressive set of pieces with similar characteristics did not allow the recognition of these textiles as an autonomous group. However, this perspective changed in the light of the elements that have since been collected. Throughout the ongoing research, based on the analysis of different but related sources, both written and material, it has been possible to identify not only more identical pieces, but also to better understand its complex historical background. A still significant group of around 300 objects intended for Catholic worship and the decoration of the sacred space, most of which date from the 17th and 18th centuries, has since been identified. These objects combine both Chinese and European iconographic models, materials, and technical procedures responsible for a syncretic and original identity. Such hybrid textiles testify not merely to the migration of people, objects, and imagery from one cultural and religious context to another, but above all, to a complex process of reinterpretation and resignification in which objects and images gain new meanings depending on the place and the audience with which they interact. Consider the extensive network of colleges run by the Society of Jesus in Portugal and in the Portuguese Overseas Empire, which was both the main driving force and one of the earliest recipients of these and other Asian-made objects. Through their procurators, important channels of communication and distribution were established in order not only to supervise the counting of houses, colleges, and possessions, but also to purchase all the necessary provisions for their daily life. In this regard, the testimony of the procurator of the province of Japan from Macau to the Father General of the company in 1624 is significant. He explains that the procurator provides them with all the necessities of their persons as well as spiritual things for the Christendom, like rosaries, images, ornaments. And he goes on and say, since this place is unlike another in India, he has several orders for ornaments and various supplies for Goa, the college, the professed house, Cochin, Malacca, even Maluku, Bengal, and the Philippines. to which he sends all kinds of things from China, even gilded altarpieces and large gilded torches for their churches, and this year he has supplied various things for all these parts, and he provides others for when there are ships. From these extracts, one realizes the extent of the network of supply of artistic objects in the closest and furthest circles of Macau, and the impact that this had on the scale of production, in order to ensure that works were provided on time and in sufficient quantity. In the letter written in 1734 by Father Francisco de Chaves from the mission of Tonkin in the present-day Vietnam to Father Francisco de Cortes, the superior of Guangzhou residence, he states that around 60 taels had been sent to Canton or Guangzhou to purchase white or red cloth for an altar frontal and a chasuble, as well as furnishings to embellish the church. Although late in date, this document allows us to understand what was being requested, the purpose for which it was intended, and the source of the funds. In this case, an alms offered by a local Christian specifically for this purpose. The same information also confirms that these practices have been maintained over time. Given the immense difficulties that the missionaries encountered in the field, the support of the local Christian communities, whether through donations like these, the purchase of lands, or the loan of houses, was one of the fundamental pillars for the survival of the Jesuit mission in China since its earliest days. However, the supply of these Chinese ornaments was not limited to the Asian missionary contexts or to the priests of the Society of Jesus. Again, in 1734, the aforementioned Father Francisco de Cortes was the main intermediary in the process of obtaining and sending a set of at least 25 items, including chasubles, dalmatics, copes, and curtains, for example. From Canton to Macau, and from there to the College of St. Antão in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. The correspondence relating to this transaction shows that the middlemen worked not only with guaranteed orders and consignees, but also with loose and consignment of sales on the marketplace of Macau, Goa, and even Lisbon, confirming the existence of a sufficiently wide market for this production, from which many middlemen, even members of other Christian orders, could draw their supplies. Despite their criticism to the Jesuits, both the Dominicans and the Franciscan missionaries ended up using among their evangelizing methods some of the elements associated with the accommodation process that historiography almost exclusively tends to attribute to members of the Society of Jesus. Written sources from these and other mendicant orders, such as the Augustinians, confirm the use of this type of Chinese artifact in celebrations organized in India to decorate ceremonial spaces and thus attract local communities to the Catholic faith. In 1617, the Church of the Holy Spirit in the Franciscan convent of Old Goa was decorated with Chinese blankets for the festivities in honor of the Immaculate Conception. A few years later, the Augustine friar Sebastião Manrique also described the space prepared for an audience with the sovereign of Arakan, now Myanmar, in which a Chinese embroidered underpendion of white damask and crimson velvet was used. These priests not only used Chinese textiles, but also provided iconographic guidelines specific to their respective orders, such as their emblems and the depiction of some of their most important devotions or representative figures, like Saint Dominic and Saint Anthony. In addition, there is a wide range of individuals associated with the administration of the State of India or with maritime activity who benefit from the privileges associated with their respective functions, and who, on their own initiative or in the service of others, acquire and distribute these goods elsewhere. Many are the result of almsgiving by the faithful who sent them to their lands in payment for promises made in honor of their saint patrons. For example, in 1590, Dom Afonso Norandin, a convert from Hormuz, ordered the purchase of several sets of frontals and vestments, mostly made with white Chinese damask, for various chapels in Lisbon and other places in Portugal. In addition to wills and inventories, the circulation of Chinese Christian implements can also be traced back through administrative documentation that show requests for exemption from customs duties, when the items arrived in Portugal for devotional purposes. This was the case with Confraternity of Our Lady of the Incarnation on the outskirts of Lisbon, which in 1639 reported precisely a frontal ornament and vestment with its pulpit cloth that Manuel de Moraes Pimenta sent him from China as an alms for the said lady because he lives in said parish and is her devotee. Some of these textiles were commissioned by the religious themselves or confreres or brotherhoods and individuals in Portugal. It is worth to mention the shipments of ornaments that the powerful merchant Francisco Carvalho Aranha sent from Macau in the 1620s and the 1630s at the request of some institutions based in Braga, including the Brotherhood of the Holy Cross. Over the years, Carvalho Aranha endeavored to respond to the requests he received. But as he himself regretted, the instructions are largely lacking. Rather, they are little more than the desired typology and indication that they must be Chinese origin. Apparently, that was enough, given the growing taste for exotic, exquisite, and status-conferring Oriental goods in Portugal. Given this scenario, it is easy to understand how such objects, initially designed for a specifically and geographically limited reality, soon became a sufficiently profitable and expressive business capable of attracting Chinese craftsmen. In fact, this business is not limited to exuberant pieces for sacred service, but also includes rich furnishings for domestic functions and clothing. It should also be remembered that although this production was initially aimed at the interests of the Portuguese patronage, it soon spread to other Europeans either from Lisbon via the Indian Run, which linked India and Portugal, or directly from Asia. This was the case with the Spanish, in whose trade routes the Portuguese were heavily involved. This was also the case with the British and the Dutch during the 17th century, that even after their growing dominance in the area and the permanent rivalry, not only benefited from the well-established Portuguese trading networks, but also continued to depend on these exchange and distribution channels, especially those between Macau and Guangzhou. Due to their specific functions, the manufacture of these objects required prior instructions on the colors of the liturgical calendar, the morphology, and even the dimensions prescribed by the Catholic Church for the various types of implements. Guidelines on Christian imagery and heraldry, as well as European motifs, were equally necessary and provided in the form of visual devices. Like illustrated books, liturgical textiles were also means of non-verbal communication and served as catechetical tools to teach the story and word of Jesus Christ. As experience had shown, this approach was more powerful and effective than preaching, and above all, more accessible to minds unfamiliar with abstract discourse, as was the case. Alongside engravings, drawings, and paintings that inevitably circulated and contributed to the spread of the iconographic repertoires, European vestments were also taken as references by the Chinese craftsmen. Although we have no material evidence or descriptions of these pieces, some morphological, technical, and compositional choices in the surviving works suggest their possible appearance. Take, for example, the prevalence of the Spanish model among the vestments inventoried, characterized by column-shaped orphreys on both the front and back panels, and by a very pronounced pear shape or violin profile, which originated in the 16th century after the Counter-Reformation. Giambattista Confalonieri, secretary of Fabio Biondi, apostolic collector in Portugal, mentioned precisely this morphology of short chasubles when he visited Portugal in 1593, noting that the vestments in Portuguese churches and sacristies were different from those in Rome. In the 17th century, when textiles were mainly destined for the Portuguese market, pieces were executed with high relief and textured effects achieved using padding materials such as hemp and cotton fibers or paper rolls. Although silk was also used in its own, it was mostly explored in conjunction with double-twisted silk cord and laminated gold paper thread to fill the surfaces and to outline the motifs. This thread cannot perforate the ground fabric, but thanks to its high degree of malleability, it easily allows for the recreation of pattern motifs such as scales or basket effects, replicating one of the most representative techniques of the 16th and 17th century European gold embroidery. No less interesting is the way in which the Christian themes are organized, with the figuration integrated into medallions, cartouches, or architectural structures. These compositions are arranged along vertical axes that coincide with the warframes of the vestments, along which the saints are depicted, sometimes articulated with representations of balustrades and perspective floors with a three-dimensional effect, which clearly relate to the figurative scenes inherited from the Italian Quattrocento, Flemish and Spanish production in Ornois. Of the group, the saints stand out. In addition to being guardians of the church, these privileged intercessors before God are the paradigmatic example as martyrs of dedication to the Christian faith as the path to the salvation, human salvation. This theme was particularly suited to the context of missionary work in East Asia, where the circulation of relics of the most recent martyrs was encouraged, especially in China and Japan. Alongside the representation of saints that are part of the geology, Marian images were also recognized. From 1518 onwards, there was a continued effort to promote various forms of Marian devotion in China, either through the publication of catechetical, exegetical, and liturgical texts on Mary, or through visual representation of the Holy Mother of Christ. We've seen this morning, so I don't have to talk about the relation with Guanu. I thank Patricia for helping this process. Curiously, however, her embroidery representations are never mentioned, although we know of cases such as the monumental depiction of the Madonna and Child wrapped in a rosary held by angels. Another variant identified in this context is that of the suckling virgin. Common in Portuguese painting and sculpture of the 15th and 16th centuries due to the direct influence of Flemish art, its presence confirms the interest in promoting this protective dimension that we see in Guanyin, for example, of the Holy Mother. On the other hand, the theme of the Salus Populi Romani, early promoted by Matheus Ricci and produced in situ by Jesuit or local painters, has not yet been found among the objects studied. The same is true of representations of the life of Jesus Christ, such as the Nativity, the Baptism, and the Crucifixion. We do know, however, from Father Luis Frois, that several Christian figurative themes from the Old and New Testaments, such as the sacrifice of Abraham, the king's birth, and so on, were used in the celebrations of the College of the Society of Jesus in Goa in 1560s. So, who knows, most for sure they existed. Lastly, the Christological monogram, which became the central motif of the insignia of the Society of Jesus, is regularly present on these pieces, as are heraldic emblems of other religious orders or brotherhoods. This was a simple and effective way of reminding the participants in the celebrations and posterity of their participation in the mission in Asia under Portuguese patronage. However, the guidelines provided were limited, forcing the mediators to intervene more directly in the definition of such coveted textiles. In fact, this was not just a mechanical act of repeating models and indications, although it was that as well. Copying was a very important process of apprenticeship and an evangelizing strategy to promote the use of images in missionary visual culture in China. Moreover, the Chinese had long practiced this process, which could also help to speed up work and make it more profitable, even if it led craftsmen to reproduce forms that they did not always understand and misinterpreted, as happened in the exports, Chinese porcelain for export. Local agents and artisans may pass on objects and ideas or adapt them to their environment. In this regard, it is worth noting how the phoenix or the double-headed eagle are represented with their scaly necks or with open wings and extending tails, as if inscribed within an imaginary circle, as seen in Chinese rank badges and other textiles from the Ming and the beginning of Qing dynasties. or the figures of saints, the Virgin and angels, are portrayed with scenicized facial features. The angels also recalling Buddhist apsaras or bodhisattvas, and the compositions are enriched with Qi, Chinese clouds patterns, and Chinese flora and fauna. This strategy of engaging with Chinese ideas and artistic styles is also evident in the depiction of the Immaculate Conception, one of the Marian dogmas, in an impressive composite image of Mary as a Chinese lady. But who was responsible for defining the artistic programs resulting from this process of interculturation in liturgical textiles with a view to a progressive familiarity and future growth of Christianity in China? In all probability, and similarly to what happened with those other visual images, such as painting and engraving, the missionaries themselves invested in this cultural adaptation, imitating Chinese taste and incorporating it into their original archetypes. The extent and success of this process depended on several factors, especially the context, the time, and the place, which were so often highlighted in the manual letters of the religious as mandatory aspects regarding protection and prudence, quote, or of greater or less restraint in terms of the external apparatus that it was then possible or convenient to adapt at the time. Macau, as we have seen, was the epicenter of the great enterprise of spreading Christianity in the Far East. But like Goa, it was a colonial center where the Portuguese customs were the norm for the Jesuits, even though the Portuguese and Luso-Asian population was but a minority of the total. In the internal mission, that is to say, in China and in other neighboring territories where the religious were expanding, the Jesuit missionaries not only invested a great deal in the knowledge and adaptation of Chinese culture and art, but also had to adapt over time to an unstable internal situation, most of the time unfavorable to their presence. Therefore, such realities necessarily determined different paths in the dialogue of artistic forms that integrated liturgical vestments made in China, influencing the production of objects with a more or less Chinese essence, depending on the target audience. In fact, while some pieces are entirely European and show phenomena of greater mimicry in relation to the original references, in others, the combination in different proportions of Christian and European motifs with traditional Chinese patterns and craftsmen is outstanding. In these pieces, the European elements tend to stand out against the Chinese motifs that fill the remaining areas of the objects. However, it is not so much the compositions based on European themes that are most prevalent and impressive, but rather those that are in keeping with Chinese artistic and cultural tradition, in a naturalistic context depicting the auspicious local flora and fauna. This repertoire provides a framework that for most of the European themes identified in the pieces studied, especially in those dated from the 16th and 17th centuries, as opposed to those from the 18th century. By this time, figurative subjects virtually disappeared from liturgical ornaments, giving way to both natural and fantastic vegetal patterns. An exception to this trend is in embroidered objects with a pronounced Chinese profile, is a unique set of vestments dated from the end of the 18th century, decorated musical instruments, beds, and the 8 auspicious Buddhist symbols. Overall, these Chinese Christian textiles are the result of an organized and a more or less serial production, in line with traditional Chinese modular system, which allowed a large quantity and variety of identical items while guaranteeing quality standards with minimum of time and costs. The affinity found in the group study also suggests that they were made in similar conditions and reinforces the idea that they were carried out in a professional workshop environment, although for now we ignore exactly where and how the work was organized. However, regardless of the material and technical resources used in this production, the subsequent cutting and assembly could vary. In a first situation, the defined model was first cut or outlined on the support, as was the pattern, which was also conceived from scratch and embroidered considering the morphology of the piece for which it was intended. Alternatively, other examples are the result of cutting out previously embroidered supports, often without respecting the original decorative scheme. This variation had the advantage of not depending on specific instructions or orders as far as the morphology of the pieces was respected. Moreover, the use of this method not only encouraged cheaper production, but also made it possible to export already embroidered fabrics, which could then be cut and assembled as required elsewhere. The examples identified so far undoubtedly represent a tiny sample of this successful multivalent textile production. But more than just materially rich objects with original artistic programs, these ecclesiastic implements were also important mediators in the adaptive approach to introduce the Christian faith to the Chinese. As Antonio de Cario notes, they too, along the other devotional objects, contributed to a vibrant presence of the Roman Catholic tradition in China. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for this very informative and rich presentation. I find the workshop part particularly intriguing. There was like a moment when I was like looking at one of the examples that you quote, the one immediately before the 8 treasures. I have a feeling that it somehow have given me the feeling it looks like a dragon robe. Especially the decorations, down at the lower part of that vestment. So I was like thinking, have you actually come across like any particular influence, like Chinese textile or Chinese fashion at that time, have any kind of like influence on the pattern or these on the materials that you have been looking at?
Yeah, it's working. I haven't invested in that part, but it's very probably, highly probable. And we mustn't forget that some of these pieces were used converting other existences. So it's probable to find this sort of aspects that you were mentioning. It's a very interesting point.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
So I would like to. Any questions from our audience? Okay, I think the lady first, and then Antonio, and then William. Yeah.
That this was going, the vestments were going from China to Portugal. Were they also importing, for wealthy people, importing fabric for their own use?
Yes. You have noticed, for example, of Queen Catherine of Austria. She had in her inventory from the 1520s, she had pieces of woven textiles. You also, her husband had as well. And we had notice of, how do you say, bandeiras? Of the country, how do you say the, thank you, flags. Mention of flags made with Chinese fabrics from the same period.
Antonio?
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your talk. My question is related to the absence of the Salus Populi Romani Madonna. You were mentioning that there were different iconographies of Our Lady, but somehow the one on the Salus Populi Romani Madonna was lacking. I would like to know if you have an idea why this is so, because we know that especially between the late Ming and the early Qing dynasty in China, this was the most widespread iconography for both statues, for example, but also oil on canvas paintings. So I look forward to knowing more. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. The fact that I didn't find any doesn't mean that we haven't. These are different things, totally different. On the other side, the pieces I showed you are out of China, so we don't know what existed exactly, what survived or not. I found in some of the documentaries, manuscripts, the letters, annual letters from the Jesuits. You find that even especially women from the local communities. They were invested in contributing to the local place, local churches, doing their own curtains and altar frontals and so on. So I wouldn't know, and I sincerely believe there would exist this iconography as well. So the fact is that we don't know so far, but probably it makes sense. Makes all the sense. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the questions you were asking is where they're coming from in China. I wonder if you looked at the style of embroidery and if you were able to sort of spend some time looking at maybe the differences between Guangzhou, so from Canton, versus Suzhou, versus even Changsha. They have their own distinct sort of embroidery patterns.
I try to do that work in order to try to find where they fit. But as you have seen, even in technical procedures, they are a merge of techniques. For example, you have that you don't find that often in the Chinese pieces, as far as I understood, that are clearly made to speed up the process. They don't follow the traditional method of embroidery in China. They use the materials. Materials are there, but not totally the techniques. You don't find them. So this is also a mixture regarding techniques. In order to, I think, to follow, for example, I mentioned purposely the aspect of the relief, because the 17th century pieces that I showed you are very high relief pattern made. These hands, for example, in the 18th century, they turn only in silk. Papal gilt thread disappears. The volume, the texture, the padding, they simply disappear because probably Portugal lost his importance, his reference. So you have an more international style that is more acquainted to everyone. So, and you have silk only, for example. So it's quite adapted to and the 17th century pieces are very alike regarding the technical procedures and so on. Thank you.
Interesting. I mean, it seems like they also have to adapt to the working schedule. I mean, the dates of the ships, when it's leaving back to Portugal, and then they have to speed up. Yes, speed up the production.
We have references about that. They're saying even pieces that were conceived from scratch, sometimes we have noticed that saying, "Oh, my apologies, the piece is not so good because we didn't have time. We have the monsoon and we have to wrap it up." Yes.
Interesting. So thank you, Maria. We can have more questions later in the group discussion session. Thank you very much, Maria. So our next speaker, we will still look at Macau. Our next speaker is Mr. Liu Heng, an emerging scholar. He's a PhD candidate at École particulière des hautes études. Sorry, my French is. And Institute of East Asian Art History in Heidelberg University. So he will focus on the architectural style of the facade of St. Paul's in Macau. And Liu Heng, the floor is all yours.
Good afternoon. And first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Caroline for the invitation and express my gratitude to ACM for organizing this conference. Today, I will introduce the hybrid style of the facade of St. Paul's in Macau. This is a chapter from my thesis, Reception and Assimilation of European Art in China and Japan from 1582 to 1644. Since the Portuguese occupation of Macau and the establishment of their colonial stronghold in the late 16th century, Macau has served as a transit point and a religious center for the Jews in East Asia. During this period, St. Paul's Church was constructed. Portuguese merchant in Macau financed the project. The design was led by Father Carlos Spinola, and the facade of St. Paul, even centuries later, remain enigmatic. So our study is structured around some core questions. First is what are the primary stylistic characteristics of the facade of the simple church. And the second, what Oriental elements are present in facade of simple church, and what is their significance in the cross-cultural context. And the third, what is the design concept of the facade of simple church, and why did the Jesuits incorporate Oriental elements into it? And first, we discovered that the facade design of simple church originated from a European print, Tota Pochola by Filippo Manzo. This engraving primarily depicts the scene from Revelation chapter 12, where the great red dragon attacked Christ and the Virgin Mary. One of the prominent images is the flood created by the great red dragon. However, this raises a question: why did the Jesuits choose this scene? Does it have a special connection to the city of Macau? We will revisit this question when we discuss the Virgin Mary on the facade below. The ground floor, the lintel of the central door, has the name of the church engraved in the light relief Madère Day. On the lintels of two small doors, the Jesuit symbol RHS is engraved. They are considered to be of the oceanic style. The light ice is composed of two fish. Is further interpreted to mean that there is a close relationship between the fish and the Christianity, and that was a common symbol used by the early Christians, but perhaps it could be the maritime feature from Portuguese style. And the second level, Jade Saints. The main decoration consists of 4 bronze statues of saints, cast at the Macau's Carnan foundry run by Manuel Davalis Bocajo, which help of the Chinese craftsmen from Foshan. This sculpture resembles similar one made in Portugal and Brazil, possibly using wooden molds transported from Lisbon, which might explain why the statue was completed 7 years after the facade. The saints are housed in arched niche with shell-like dome, following a classic style. The statue wore clerical garments which pose and show softness but retain some stiffness. A letter mentions that 4 similar statues were placed on the church's main altar, mirroring the facade design and demonstrating the thematic connection between the interior and the exterior. This concept was later seen in Latin America. And one notable feature of this statue is their original colors. Well, they no appear bronze. Historical records indicate that their clothes were originally gilded. Qing Dynasty documents describe them as splendid. Additionally, a 1644 letter by Antonio Ferreira confirms that the statue was gilded when created, which Faisan has penned right. The gilding of statues' clothes was not a common practice among European contemporaries. Cesar Galeazzi suggests it may have been inspired by gilded altarpieces from the later Gothic period onward. Alternatively, instant influence could have played a role. For example, gold and red are common colors used in the painting of Buddhist sculpture. Another possibility is the influence of local icons like Matsuyama statues, frequently gilded or dressed in gold. The face and hands are red. Such adaptations might have been intended to align with Chinese aesthetic preference and the stereotype of idols. And the third level, this is the most spectacular and richly decorated part of the facade. At this level, local artistic styles are introduced, centering around the sculpture and the Virgin Mary. The central Virgin Mary is placed with a long arched niche, which, according to Father Montagny, was once accompanied by 2 cast metal angels holding a crown above her head. The archway is adorned with roses and lilies, symbols of purity. On the other side of the shrine, there are 6 angels in relief, divided into 3 groups arranged vertically. Notably, no one of the angels have halos. likely reflecting the influence of the Renaissance. What stands out most about these reliefs is the artistic style. The detailing exhibits strong Eastern features, particularly in the swirling, auspicious clouds, which resemble traditional Buddhist depiction of clouds. The angelic garments also carry an Oriental aesthetic, plain, soft, and symbolic rather than realistic, emphasizing the gentle, fluttering motion of the fabric. Together with the central statue of the Virgin Mary, this group of carving form the Assumption of the Virgin. The intercessory role of the Virgin Mary is at the core of the Jesuit ideology. On the side of the Central Virgin Mary are depictions of Christian themes. To the left of the Fountain of Life, there is the relief of Portuguese galleon, like no carrack, a common ship in Portugal during the age of exploration. The ship is depicted sailing on turbulent waters, characterized by canonical curves and whirlpool often used in Chinese art to represent water currents. On the sea's surface, two fish leap out of the water, accompanied by two creatures with human head and fish bodies, rendered in a somewhat crude style. Above the ship on the upper left is a relief of the Virgin Mary, the Star of the Sea, with her hand joined in prayer, offering protection and blessing for the voyager. The ship could symbolize both Christianity and Jesuit, with the mermaid representing the temptation encountered on the journey of faith. Additionally, the ship itself is a common metaphor for the church. The term name is originated from Latin word navis, it means ship, an imagery often employed by the Portuguese during their maritime area. It is worth noting Macau is a coastal city where the primary deity worshipped by the local population is Mazu Ama, the goddess of the sea. As a goddess, did the Jesuits draw on the parallel between local belief and Christianity, emphasizing Mary's role as a protector of sea voyage? We revisit the previous question here. What was the Jesuits' main intention in choosing the engraving Tota Porcelain as a prototype for the facade design of symbols? This should be connected to some of the adaptive strategy of Jesuits employed upon entering China. When they arrived on the mainland in 16th century, they were initially mistaken for Buddhist monks, a misunderstanding they tacitly accepted to reduce resistance to their missionary work. Similarly, instances of icon misidentification frequently occurred. For example, when they displayed an image on the Virgin Mary in Zhaoqing, it was initially mistaken for the Bodhisattva Guanyin. Many Chinese people go to pray for blessing to have a son, although this misunderstanding was later corrected. During Madame Lich's time, the Jesuits' respect for Confucianism and their emphasizing on the similarity between Confucian and Christian concept demonstrated their open and accommodating attitude toward local culture and religion. In Macau, we believe that this policy was similarly applied. Thus, their choice of Tota Porcelain as the dominant image on the church facade was likely driven by two key considerations. First, the scene of the Virgin Mary and Christ escaping from the flood created by the great red dragon could serve as the implicit metaphor. In Macau, a coastal city, those who believe in Christ will be protected from floods and calamities. This imagery aligns with the local tradition of worshipping deity associated with the sea. Second, the miraculous power of Christ and Virgin Mary was also intended to assist the Jesuits in saving the city and bringing the gospel to its people. Moreover, Virgin Mary's functional overlap with Mazu was undoubtedly a deliberate Jesuit strategy, but this was not necessarily a direct competition between the two deities. Instead, the Jesuits adopted a compromising approach, allowing a degree of iconographic ambiguity. On the right side, the famous Virgin Mary on the dragon's head. The depiction of the dragon and its metaphorical significance is both intriguing and complex. This creature, compared to the great red dragon image in Tota Porcelain, its difference is that primary height features a demonic figure with two horns and chin tentacles. Its change is meant to emphasize that it's an evil character. Interestingly, dragon's scale and claws had a similarity to those of the Chinese dragon. If this image incorporates features from the Chinese dragon, it is worth noting that it does not reflect the noble, revered dragon of Chinese tradition. Given the Jesuit missionary strategy in China at the time, this is likely aimed to adapt to Chinese culture in a positive and respectful manner. At the same time, considering the facade emphasizing on maritime protection, it may be suggesting that this image represents another kind of evil water creature related to the dragon in Chinese mythology, the Jiao dragon, Jiaolong. It's often blamed for storm and shipwrecks. This Jiao dragon also corresponds to the great red dragon. In the cross-cultural context, the Virgin Mary became a shared maritime protector for both Eastern and Western Christians, shielding them from the threats of evil. And extending further outward is a set of educational relief sculptures, a demon with a beast's head and a woman's body, and a skeleton, symbolizing sexual temptation and reflection on dice, respectively. On both sides, Chinese inscriptions of moral teaching are carved, though the engraving appears somewhat rough. Below main relief, horizontal panels feature decorative carving of fruits, including local Chinese produce such as lychees. Additionally, on the left side of this level is a carved human head, thought to commemorate a contributor to church construction, possibly the designer Father Carlos Spinola. And at the first level and the top triangle lintel, the statue of Jesus appears as a child, with his right hand pointing to the sky. According to the records, his left hand originally held a golden globe symbolizing the earth, topped with a cross, and he wore a golden crown. Though this item have been lost, Jesus' gesture signifies his dominance over the world and his rule as the ultimate truth, while the globe and the cross represent his guidance or Christian toward the light. Beneath the statue, a chrysanthemum, this could be evidence of Japanese craftsmen's involvement in the carving. The shrine side are adorned with objects related to the crucifixion. In the artistic representation of the two angles relief, the force and the dynamic movement of their clothing reflect an Oriental style, although their face and proportion appear somewhat crude. Some Oriental lines at the edge of the scene further enhance the Eastern aesthetic. And the facade design of symbols in Macau reflects the Jesuit policy of cultural adaptation, a strategy pioneered by Father Alessandro Valignano and successfully implemented by Madame Lichi in mainland China. Additionally, Japanese Christians who had fled to Macau due to the persecution may have also contributed to its construction. The students of Father Nicolau might have played a role in the Oriental-style decorations, judging by the craftsmanship of Chinese calligraphy and engravings. The participation of highly skilled Chinese artisans seems to have been limited. From an overall structural perspective, the facade's artistic design exhibits a modular and segmented approach. Chinese craftsmen, Japanese craftsmen, and Jesuits were likely engaged in a group-based creative process. This also explains why the facade of St. Paul's Church appeared to be a patchwork. As for the construction of itself, it was likely carried out by teams of craftsmen from Guangdong or Fujian. In any case, the hybrid style effectively reduced the cultural barrier between East and West, simplifying the missionary work and enhancing the understanding of Christian theology. For the Jesuits, visual art served as a powerful and intuitive tool for conveying religious ideas, especially given the language challenge faced in East Asia. Furthermore, displaying the specific ability of the icon, such as navigational protection provided by Virgin Mary, it also demonstrates an understanding of local needs. Another key question arises regarding the overall architectural style of the facade. Does it align with a typical Renaissance or Baroque design? A frequent approach is to compare simple facade with church of the Jesuit in Rome, but built steadily early. Where similarity exists, such as swirling buttresses, the Church of Jesus in Rome displayed distinct Baroque characteristics, including massive decorative columns and overlapping buttresses, although the facade of a simple church also features decorative columns. They are cylindrical and do not extend beyond the height of their respective floors. But the facade of the simple church still maintains a clear connection to the Jesuit architectural tradition of the time. For example, the facade of simple bears similarity to that of St. Charles Borromeo Church in Antwerp, which was constructed between 1650 and 1621. The structure and the stylistic elements of both churches are highly similar, which St. Charles Borromeo Church itself drawing inspiration from the Church of Jesus in Rome, which served as a reference model. The geographical element and the construction constraint of Macau also played a crucial role in shaping the facade of the building, although the designer was likely familiar with classical Renaissance and Baroque architectural styles. In Macau, works with relevant architectural experience were extremely rare, if not entirely absent, compounded by the lack of the advanced construction equipment. Additionally, due to the frequent occurrence of typhoons in Macau, safety had to be a top priority in the design process. As a result, the church was built with a relatively low height to ensure structural stability. Finally, we refer to Roberto González Echavarria perspective, which suggests that Baroque church in Latin America and Spanish rule often incorporated local elements, reflecting a fusion of European and indigenous styles. The facade of Simples in Macau was also born from a hybrid design concept, and due to local constraint, it ultimately exhibited characteristics of both Baroque and Mannerist architectural styles, while also incorporating Eastern elements. It is not only a crystallization of Eastern and Western cultural and artistic fusion, but also as a model of collaboration between Eastern artisans and Jesuits. And thank you.
Thank you, Liu Heng, for this very detailed reading of this monument. I'm from Hong Kong. I've been to Macau many times, but to be honest, I never paid that much attention to the complex iconography and also the artistic heritage behind it. So at one point, I was quite curious. At one point you you included in your slide a source, a text from Chinese. Right? That's like gosh, I forgot the name. The 澳门游记, right? In the early part of your presentation. So I just wondered. If you have come across more descriptions by the Chinese about the St. Paul's.
Yeah. You mean the inscriptions like educational educational carving or 圣母塔龙头 like that.
No, I would say, is that like more description about the whole thing? You know,
Yeah.
that's the about the Chinese impression about St. Paul's.
Because I want to talk more about the Virgin Mary in the cross culture, both in Chinese culture and in the Christian culture, and establish a connection between the two cultures. So I want to talk more about the metaphor and the cross-culture element, and have a connection with the mythology Chinese, like the Jiao Dragon. This.
Okay. Now I turn to the floor. Any questions, any comments about the St. Paul's in Macau? Sorry, is that someone saying something?
More interested to know what is the intention of the designer who put in all this hybrid style. They mean the Eastern and the Western, right? They have the Eastern and Western element in doing this. What is the intention? For instance, Singapore is a colony, therefore our St. Andrew Cathedral is all Western, don't have any Eastern element in it. So how come they want to put this hybrid style on the facade?
I think just want the facade as the altarpiece for the all people, like local Macau citizen. So they want to incorporate Oriental elements into it and establish connection between the two cultures, because they want to explain the Christian ideology is too complex, so they want to establish altarpiece like the incorporates.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say especially, I think he was like making the comparison with St. Andrews in Singapore. But I think, when the St. Paul was set up in Macau, it was like in a much earlier time than, much earlier before St. Andrews. And I believe that, the builders, certainly in their mind, they believe that that's a need to use more local imageries, for the people to better understand the faith. And then so I think that's like one of the reasons why they need to have inscriptions even on that. So when you look at, there's no confusion in understanding what this imagery is about. I believe that's a practical need involved in that. Yeah, and any other questions? In the center, you see?
Thank you very much for your fascinating paper. Personally, I don't think the Japanese artists, also disciples of Giovanni Cola, Italian painter, who flew to Macau with his disciples, contributed to the style and architecture of the facade of St. Paul in Macau. But anyway, it is a very big question to investigate. But my question is that I've always questioned to myself, maybe there can be some relationships between early Baroque architecture in Goa or Baroque architecture in Manila of that time, because sometimes I think it is not necessary to compare always to European architecture that's very far from here. So this is my question.
Yeah, I think originally they want to build a Baroque style facade, but due to some environment constraint, like in Macau, they don't have so many craftsmen. They can build the facade and sometime they want to design more higher because Macau have so many typhoons at the time, so they reduced some height and also some columns not too grand. So they change the style. It's not it's not a Baroque typical style. It's for the practical and also for the safety, they change some design. So, yeah.
So maybe it can be possible to recognize some relationships between early Baroque architecture in Philippines, in Goa, in India. It can be possible.
I think in Goa it's possible because Goa is the first transpoint, and in Macau is need more shape. So there have less designer or craftsman from Europe. So I think in Goa it's very possible to build a Baroque style, and also even in Latin America. But in Macau, she had to find some craftsmen from Japan, also from Foshan. So this craftsmen, they don't know very well for the European facade European church. So they had to abandon some design. So I think it's this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you, Liu Heng, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think it's a little break time for now.
Great, thank you very much. Can we thank both our speaker and also our moderator, Dr. Kevin Lam, as well? Wow, so fascinating presentation. I've been to St. Paul's ruins many times, so it puts things in a very different light now. Happy to invite our moderator, Dr. Kevin Lam, to join us back on stage. Let's welcome him, please.
Thank you for coming back after the tea break. So the third presentation for the second panel, the impact of Christianity on Chinese material culture, we are thrilled to have Professor Guo Mo from the University International College from Macau University of Science and Technology. Her topic will be about porcelain, about Christian iconography on Ming and Qing porcelain, religious influence, and artistic hybridization. So welcome, Professor Guo.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Kevin, for the kind introduction. And I also want to thank ACM for giving me this opportunity to speak today, share my research, and have this meaningful conversation with all of you. So I have been working on cross-cultural studies of Portuguese faience and Chinese porcelain in Portugal, especially Chinese inspiration in 17th century Portuguese porcelain. So my research focuses on the patterns of these ceramics and how they connect to the historical periods in which they were made in. So there was one question that really got me curious was, how do changes in Christian iconography on Chinese porcelain relate to the social and the religions of their time? So to explore this, I picked 4 representative pieces of Chinese porcelain with Christian iconography, and each from a different historical period, from Ming to Qing dynasties. And my goal is to see how China's Christian missions influenced the designs on this Chinese porcelain, and also looking at the artistic blending that happened. So my goal is to see, I want to visualize the link between Chinese porcelain and their culture context, especially how religious policies changed over time. So let's start with the first piece. Okay, this one. There's a Chinese porcelain ball from the Deluxe Almeida Museum in Lisbon, and the ball dates between 1520 and 1540, during the Ming Zhengde Jiajing period. it classified as first-order porcelain. So the inside ring of this ball has a Latin phrase, Ave Maria Gracia Plena. What's interesting here is how Chinese craftsmen, they turned the Latin letters into symbols when they tried to copy the inscription. And in the center, we can see a guardian line, a Buddhist line with brocaded ball. And now let's have a look at the outside of the ball. It's divided into 4 round sections with different symbols. Portugal's royal coat of arms, traditional Chinese natural scene, armillary sphere of King Manuel I, and monogram. So here is a fun detail. Because the Chinese craftsmen, they were not familiar with Portuguese royal imagery, so they painted the coat of arms upside down, making it look like a Chinese bronze bell. Yeah. And notably, Professor Maria Antonia Pinto Madusch noted the resemblance between the monogram and the one carved in relief in the Jerónimos in Lisbon. It appears designed to simulate dry, broken twigs. So this piece, it reflects the characteristics of first-order porcelain, and it starts a religious element. I show several examples of first-order porcelain here. So the religious elements during this time are not very obvious, and they don't mix too much with local motifs. And this matches the religious policies of that era, where there wasn't much integration with local culture or religious practices. And the the term of first-order porcelain referred to a Bronze period, starting in 1498, when the Portuguese navigator Vasco da Gama arrived in Calicut. He brought several pieces of Chinese porcelain to present to his king, Dom Manuel. And the king was so fascinated by the Chinese porcelain and ordered Chinese porcelain with his royal symbol. So let's look at some key religious activities in China during this first-order porcelain period. So in 1513, during the Ming reign, the Portuguese João Alvados set his foot in China. And in 1552, Francis Xavier arrived in South China. In 1555, we see more activities with Jesuit Pacheco. And in 1569, Curator established the Holy House of Mercy in Macau. So today, we can also see some pieces of Chinese porcelain with monogram from different period in Museum of Holy House of Mercy in Macau. So till 1582, the Jesuit Matthew Rich arrived in Macau and began his mission by immersing himself in Chinese language and culture. So that marked the start of a new era. So let's see the second piece. So the second piece is a bottle in the British Museum, and the bottle is decorated with symbols representing Christ's Passion, and is believed to made during the Tianqi, Ming Tianqi or Chongzhen period. We can also find several bottles in Lisbon, in France, and also in Brazil, with the same symbols. So on each side of the bottle, there are two identical images. The central decoration is a cross, surrounded by a crown and a ladder. So in the foreground, there are several important symbols: a whip, a rooster, and a dog holding a lit candle in its mouth. So each of these elements has a symbolic meaning. So the empty cross and the ladder symbolize the rescue of Jesus' body being taken down after the crucifixion. And the rooster symbolizes the Peter's denial of Jesus before dawn. And the whip represents the suffering of the Jesus. So the dog is very interesting, points to the Dominican order coming from their Latin title, Dominicans, or dogs of the Lord. Other side of this bottle, on the lower part, there's a beautiful Chinese landscape with pagoda, a traditional Chinese horse, two boats, and distant mountains. So in the upper section, cherubs show playing instruments among auspicious clouds, 祥云, Chinese 祥云. In Chinese, it's 祥云. So what's really fascinating about this photo is its square shape. It's from a glass prototype, and which shows how Chinese craftsmen adapted their craft to appeal to European tastes. So the blend of religious elements with rich Chinese motifs shows a harmonious mix of cultures. So the religion symbols are not very overt. They are represented subtly, reflecting the religious policies of that time. And speaking of that period, it was marked by significant missionary efforts, especially those led by Matteo Ricci. And also, this bottle also figures the symbol of Dominicans. In fact, from 1613s, the influence of Jesuits started to decline as they were joined by Dominicans, Franciscans, and Augustinians. So from the Jesuit perspective, these competing religious orders posed a threat to mission they had worked so hard to build in China. And also during this period, from 1518 to 1640, the Iberian Union, where Portugal and Spain were united under one ground, also intensified rivalries within the missionary community. And in this photo, the shape and the style are more associated with Chinese porcelain exported to Dutch. So we can also see some Dutch influence here. So now let's see the third porcelain. So the third piece is a saucer with crucifixion scene made during the Kangxi Empire reign. It's now in, this picture is from Nanchang University. But I also, just maybe 2 hours ago, I have already seen this piece in our museum. Thanks to my new friend, João. So the saucer shows a powerful scene. In the center, we see Christ on the cross with Virgin Mary and Saint John looking at him with affection. And below the cross, there are 3 wooden panels symbolizing the event. So the facial features of these 3 figures have distinct Oriental characteristics. So Chinese craftsmen, they also use the perspective techniques in this piece. This porcelain suggests it might not be a direct copy of direct copy of European print, but rather a design that evolved over time. So the pattern was probably from European print, some missionary publication. And we can also see several Chinese porcelains, figuring this crucifixion scene in many museums, like in Lisbon, in Boston, in Guangdong, Macau, and also here, as I mentioned. So key figures in the missionary work included Tang Ruowang and Nan Huairen in Chinese. So both persons showed how Jesuits navigated political landscapes to provide educational and scientific contributions. And Kangxi Sui also very open to Western culture. Like for example, he invited Tomás Ferreira and Filipe to showcase their musical talents. So until Kangxi's death, the Jesuits were treated generally very well. However, with the start of the Yongzheng reign, religion's tolerance took a sharp turn, and the Yongzheng began proscribing Christianity. And finally, in 1724, Christianity was included among the perverse sects and the sinister doctrines. So now let's look at the last piece. So last piece is a dish featuring the João, the Baptist, made between 1715 to 1725. Now in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And we can also find a similar thing with baptism in British Museum, in other collection, and even in George Welsh in Lisbon, and art collection, etc. So the center is decorated with Christ and John standing in the water, capturing the moment of baptism. In the background, there is a European-style house, and a Holy Spirit is shown as a dove descending from the sky, surrounded by the light. So the whole picture has a movement in the stillness, creating the feeling of being there for the reviewers. So the central composition of Saint John and Christ in the Jordan River is based on the passage from Gospel of Saint Matthew. And it's also worth noting that the stone painted here was a creative addition by Chinese craftsmen. They wanted to use different colors to simulate the texture and depth of real stones, giving the image a three-dimensional quality and reflecting the Western artistic influence. And we can also see early signs of Oriental style, later known as chinoiserie, that was very popular in 18th century in Europe. So it looks like a baptism of Jesus in a Chinese landscape. And during this time, European Jesuits in China played a very important role in introducing engraving and other Western techniques, which Chinese empires and scholars also very embraced. So even after Empire Yongzheng banned Christianity in 1724, there was a still strong interest in merging Western and Chinese artistic methods. So now, over time, from the first piece to the last piece, from Ming to Qing dynasties, we can see an evolution here with more evident presence of Christian iconography, with richer use of European artistic techniques, and also a more skillful incorporation of religious motifs. And it's also worth noting that in the first two pieces, the Chinese craftsmen, they mainly used the traditional Chinese motifs. So even the inscription of Maria or monogram or royal coat of arms were requested by those who commissioned the pieces. The Chinese craftsmen, they still choose the guardian line, the Buddhist line, and painted it in the, on the most important part of this piece. And on the third bottle, the second bottle is also shows the Chinese craftsmen their preference. So whether intentional or not, this choice promotes a culture blending that and religion's syncretism, creating a space for inter-religions dialogue. And in the third saucer and the last dish, although the religion's figures were adapted to fit Chinese styles, the scenes from Bible reflect the power of sacred images. When words and language became barriers, so images became essential tool for missionaries. So now, in the conclusion part, I'd like to share some insights about the fascinating genre of Chinese porcelain across regions and cultures. So the challenge we face in interpreting these Chinese porcelains is limited information about who commissioned these pieces, and the lack of historical records about how Chinese converts acquired this religion's porcelain. So right now, we cannot definitively link Chinese porcelain with Christian iconography to missionary efforts in China. And there's no historical evidence to suggest that Chinese craftsmen, they practiced Christianity and all had a deep understanding of biblical stories. And it's also possible that religion's motifs on these Chinese porcelains were inspired by other materials like engraving or wooden material. However, it do help us to understand better the spirit of Christian missions and local religious policies during different periods. And I think more importantly, it shows us an artistic hybridization and cross-cultural communication. So during this process, Chinese craftsmen, they interpreted and exploit a different religion's culture, adapting unfamiliar Christian iconography through their established culture codes or religious backgrounds. And also, Jesuit missionaries, they intentionally adopted Chinese artistic models to depict Christian narratives, aiming to make the conversion easier. So this approach also reflects their religious policy of adaptation, and also shows a strong interest in engaging with other cultures. So Chinese craftsmen and European missionaries, they worked together during this process and to promote an essential intercultural and interreligious dialogue. And this in-between space also shows the impact of European missionaries who brought a fresh wave of Christianity to China and connect different parts of the world through the exchange of art and knowledge. And I think it finally, it facilitated the coexistence and the mutual understanding among different culture civilizations. So that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Take a seat. Thank you, Guomo. Thank you. So I really like, how, focusing on 4 pieces of porcelain you come up with like this development, a wonderful story about this exchange between Chinese porcelain and Catholic iconography. So I have one question. In fact, that's not just my question. Professor Ho also have that question. So the second piece, the second example that you showed us, so you show us like two sides. Oh, but the other sides are identical.
Yes, right. Both sides.
So yeah, that's one side, with a cross, with a dog, and then with a whip, and then on the side a landscape with all the chariots and okay, interesting. So, is there any questions from our speakers or from the audience? I think Thomas and also Sister Paola have questions, right?
But maybe a nasty question, if I may. You said in your conclusion that this is creating a space for interreligious dialogue. Are you sure? Because there is a space for intercultural dialogue. But if these objects with some Buddhist hidden elements is coming in the market in Europe, do you think people could have the tools to understand that?
So my study was trying to establish the link through the visual material. So the question is not there is a interreligious dialogue or not. So my point is just establish the visual link between these elements, between the patterns.
These are forms, but it's not face.
No, you're right. It's a form. Now the fact or historical is a form. Yeah, right. Thank you for the question. I don't know if I answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Helena?
Probably another question that I'm going to make trouble with, but I was wondering when I was looking at this imagery of the canes, so the dogs and so on, did you find any motifs or any symbols which could be ambiguous?
Could be?
Ambiguous, that they could have like a Christian meaning and then maybe another...
For sure, like the dog. The dog, I did some research about this dog. So the mating resources and the material about the dog is about Dominican orders. But there's also other documentaries that is from another reference. Yes, there are some. I will do more research about that. So my article and my research just catch the main point for every symbol and every elements. Yeah. There could be. Thank you for your question. That bottle, the prototype is a glass. It's not porcelain. So the style, the shape of the bottle is from Europe. It's not Chinese. It's not a Chinese shape. It's a European shape. Okay, thank you. What is used for? For what? For the bottle, right? I think it's just for the water. For water. No? Could you tell me? I didn't do many research about that. Yes, please.
Thank you. When you find the crucifixion on a dish, and this dish arrives to Europe, it's a little weird to have lunch with the crucifixion, with your noodles, and maybe they were conceived just as decorative, symbolic items. What's your opinion on that? Thank you.
Actually, these pieces, some of them pieces were brought to Europe, but most of them they were at the Chinese museums. So I don't know the reason. And yes, please.
I mean, many of these, I think what he's also hinting at is probably used for religious rites. So it will make sense for the plate to be the host where the Eucharist will be put. There are also examples, not with religious motif, but blue and white porcelains mounted as a Eucharistic cup. There's many examples. I know there's an example I am familiar with is in Body Essex. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the information.
And building upon that, I think they also found shreds, for example, of porcelain on the island of Shanchuan, where Francis Xavier died.
Shanchuan,
Yes,
Zhangzhou.
Shanchuan, yeah, exactly. And the same ones were also found on the coast in Hong Kong, for example. So you can also see that all those dishes were meant for export and then they were found somewhere else. But as William said before, they were also used for the Eucharist, and this is something that we found in the sources. So many Jesuit missionaries, they're mentioning this as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the information. Yes.
Clement has a question.
I concur with my colleagues over here regarding about the sources and the reference towards the use in liturgical services. And the other thing, when you point out about the Chinese craftsmen's vis-a-vis relationship with the missionaries, I think one thing that instead of seeing it too linear and too both ways, just to complicate things for you, I think it's also worthwhile to consider the commerce part, the merchants part, because we have to remember at this point in time, the trade and the spread of the faith with the mission is really a symbiotic relationship. Despite that, the fact that the missions and the buyers, the traders, are at times at odds against different opinions, but they are still very intricately linked. So sometimes some of the sources could be from the comprador, the buyer's part. So maybe it's worthwhile to look into that as well.
Okay, thank you for your suggestion. Thank you.
So, any other questions? Oh, there's still, yeah.
Right, hi. Just maybe circling back to like the dog motif that was on the porcelain plate as well. Would any like evidence maybe suggest to pointing to maybe an adaptation of like a tiangou, of the heavenly dog, of like the celestial gates as well, and also dogs being a symbol of loyalty as well. I mean that permeates throughout different cultures, and would that also like this as symbolism of loyalty, of like could it be some kind of like sign of a sort of like conversion, or like some kind of yeah, I'm just wondering more about that dog motif as well. If that was something that Chinese craftsmen, when they that it was just an addition, you know, that they thought of like maybe a guardian or protector of the heavens when Christ made his ascension. So maybe just want to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. So the dog on that bottle is a dog with a candle leading on in its mouth. So that one. I just see very real Chinese porcelain with this symbol. So I don't know, maybe it's related to the royalty, as you mentioned. But I searched several studies about this symbol, and mostly it points to the Dominican order.
Hi.
Okay.
To add something about the dog.
Dog. Okay, please.
Because I'm quite familiar with the Dominican order.
Please.
So I'm pretty 100% sure that the dog refers to the Dominicans.
Thank you.
Yeah, because the Dominicans translate for the Dominicanes, which is like the hounds or the dogs of the Lord. So the dogs that pictured in the vase, the dog, right, you say it carries a torch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the story goes before the founding father of the Dominicans, which is Saint Dominic. So before he was born, the mother dreamed of him. He was going to give a birth to a son, which is the dog that carried a torch. The torch means he was going to preach the word of the Lord. Yeah, so later, the Dominicans, the symbol is always the dog with the torch. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your information.
So it's 100% sure, because when I see just now the picture, it's the dogs with the torch. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the information.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Guo. Thank you. So after 3 presentations somehow related to Portugal, we are now moving away from this Luso-Asian connection. And our last speaker, this is a topic that I'm really looking forward to, because personally I'm very interested in cloisonné. Although, I mean, in Chinese culture, cloisonné is always compared somehow with porcelain, and is always a little bit gendered. They're always considered to be feminine. So our last speaker, who will be talking about Christian cloisonné produced in China, is Dr. Manuela Paradel Lopez de Coseles from Madrid. So welcome, Manuela.
Thank you, Dr. Lam, for your kind presentation of my person. Thank you also for your kind invitation to this conference and to the ACM. I am so glad to be here to share with you, with the audience, my current research on Chinese Christian cloisonné. Today we are talking about faith and forms, so I will kindly ask you to have mercy on me, because I am experiencing a terrible jet lag, but I hope you at least enjoy the presentation. We have some beautiful images. The starting point, of course, is the technique. I suppose you know cloisonné enamel. You have the Chinese words there. Of course, we are talking about interactions, connections, transmission of knowledge, transmission of techniques, transmission of forms. Cloisonné, as it was said this morning, it's a proof that this is a kind of magic of China. China as a melting pot of everything, because actually cloisonné emerged in the Byzantine Empire, then expanded to the Europe, to the context, then to Persia, Central Asia, Tibet, and finally reached China, in which it experienced this kind of mixing of colors, motifs, traditions. It interacted, of course, with porcelain, with monumental bronzes, and with intricate decorations. It arrived, during the João period. It was developed during the Ming, and the starting point of my research was the early modern period. I was asking myself if, in relation to the cultural accommodation techniques employed by the Jesuits, they were or not interested in cloisonné making. Of course, I make this funny comparison between the Forbidden City and the recent exhibition in this museum, 23. You can see monumental cloisonnés from the Vatican museums there. And I have to say that there is few research on that area, so my presentation will be very, very basic, just to identify the several stages on the production of Christian cloisonné in China, in regards to a chronological order, of course, and to the stylistic approach. At the starting point should be the early missionaries' presence during the early modern period. When looking at the sources, visual sources, texts, inventories, descriptions, letters, unfortunately, I was not able to find any mention to cloisonné in Chinese Christian contexts. It seems cloisonné was, as you may probably know, it was a light production controlled by the imperial workshops. And if you see, for example, the depictions of early chapels in China, you can find silver work, you can find lacquer work, you can find textiles, of course, you can find porcelain, as our previous colleague said, but it's quite difficult to find any related item. Only, as our colleague who studies Macau mentioned, some of the Chinese churches was decorated with monumental bronzes. In Macau, we have seen saints made in bronze, maybe connected to that tradition of monumental bronzes in general in North China and in South China. So for example, in the old Peitang, you can find that kind of gilded monumental bronzes, but not cloisonné. For example, in the inventories of the church, it's possible to identify several silver work. For example, Fabia mentioned and depicted that pair of curates. If you look at the details, it reminds us a sport Chinese silver. One of the reasons why the Jesuits didn't use at this starting point cloisonné is that the technique en vogue at the time, both in Europe and in China, was not cloisonné, was painted enamel. There was not a production of sport cloisonné in China, as I mentioned. It was a specific production for the court context. So maybe we have to wait until the 19th century when we find several key events. Of course, during the Opium Wars, there was an increasing interest in Chinese high-level productions. After the looting of the Summer Palace, French and British scholars started to study and rediscover Chinese cloisonné. You know perfectly the Chinese Museum in Fontainebleau Palace, founded in 1863, with some of the main objects. And in the same decade, French scholars or English scholars started to write about both medieval cloisonné in Europe and Chinese cloisonné from the imperial times. Barty was the starting point of this tradition, and in that specific context, I identified the first dated items. I have to say that previously, the mentions in the literature about cloisonné were so vague, were so based on opinions, but not on research. So this is the starting point around the end of the Second Opium War, 1860, with private workshops making Christian or Chinese items related to European contexts. After that, we will talk about Alphonse Fabius, who was the key person to develop the technique and to improve also the knowledge of Chinese makers with European developments. And then we will speak about the Peitang workshop owned by the Lazarists in Beijing. These are images which, in regards to style, it's easy to understand the evolution. The first items were high-level items, and little by little, the demand increased, and the quality went down, unfortunately. You know. And we have to explore not only Beijing, but also Shanghai. Of course, in 2001, they were making interesting items. I identified some of them based on the inscriptions, on the marks, and on the catalogs. The main catalog was published in 1928. We will see it. And after that, in regards to the so-called Sino-Christian art by the Fujian art department, they started to create that kind of weird objects, more connected to an archaeological approach to Chinese culture. And finally, in the 40s, Etienne Merveille, a French Jesuit, organized a kind of reaction to the Fujian department with another archaeological approach. So, I will briefly introduce you to the main objects I found in the stages I have just shown. In regards to the first step, the private workshops, you know, when during the Opium Wars, the imperial household was not able to maintain the workshop, so the cloisonné was liberalized, both the production and the consumption. So several entrepreneurs started to reinvent the technique, and this is one of the earliest photos of a cloisonné workshop in Beijing. You can find there similar items, like the Ceralbo bell, but it's not a liturgical object, maybe it's just a decorative item. It's kept in Madrid. Later, we find also some references about private workshops, but the key event is not only they were making European taste objects. I am interested also in Chinese converts making cloisonné. You can see they were proud, saying that une famille de vieux chrétiens de Peking were making, an old family of Christians from Beijing were making this cloisonné. They founded their workshop in 1874. This is one of the first items. At the left of it was proposed, the first two items were ciboria, but they are actually not ciboria, there are decorative urns, but the second one could be a ciborium in regards to the shape, and the inside is also enameled. The other decorative urns are not enameled in the inside. You know this, where they were exhibited here. The date is known because they have this label. It's so easy. But I think it's quite interesting to see that depiction of the French consulate, because we can also reflect about this kind of early production is a kind of soft power, both of France and the French Lazarists, to show the achievements of their early mission in Beijing. But after that, one of the Lazarists, Alphonse Favier, who is well known because of his important achievement in architecture, using not only neo-Gothic style, but historicism in general in Beijing, he started to collaborate with the Sheng workshop in Beijing around 1870. And the two main sources of information in regards to this collaboration are the publication displayed in the screen, Jean Mettel, who was in Beijing from 1878 to 1880, and of course the famous book by Favier himself, in which he describes some of the most important works. This is the first generation. You can find, of course, Western shape, Chinese floral patterns, and few Christian elements, such as the cross, the Christ monogram, the Agnus Dei, etc. Sometimes inscriptions, retaken in this case the Psalm 23. The original psalm says God, not Jesus, of course, but it's quite interesting as an early hybrid work of art in regard to not only the inscription but also the iconography. We will depend on that together later. This is a beautiful detail of the base of a chalice, high quality level. You can notice it. And this is the reconstruction of a liturgical set. One of the main problems of this kind of research is the dispersion of objects. Most of them are not now in China. Most of them were destroyed, as you know. And now few of them are kept in European and American museums. You can see after that first stage in the Fabier-Deschênes collaboration, they started to make not only floral decoration or just the Christ monogram, they started to include Christian figures or scenes in chalices and other items, as you can see on the screen. And of course, I would like to underline that they were not only interested on neo-Gothic style, they were interested in historicism in general. I found several pieces inspired by Romanesque, Gothic, Baroque, or Renaissance styles. And interactions between the European models and the Chinese solutions, and the early arrival of these models to China. For example, that model from 1880, made in France, arrived 1 year, some months later, to China. We can say the same in regards to architecture. It's well known that it's not only neo-Gothic, it's a kind of melting pot of everything, hybrid and historicism approach. This is a very important date chalice owned by De La Place. And we can notice here a kind of syncretism between the concept of the resurrection in the cicada and the resurrection by Christ, and floral decoration could be related to the cycle of the year and eternity, maybe. We can reflect more on that. After that, when Fabia built the new Peitan complex, they created also a workshop. It's a quite interesting workshop specialized in cloisonné. They made also, of course, nice books. You know very well the Imprimerie de Lazariste au Pétain. Fabien himself identified in that plan the structure of the workshops, and it's quite interesting. He mentioned a Chinese store. Maybe at the beginning they subcontracted some items, maybe not, but around the early 20th century, they started to produce their own cloisonné. One of the most important examples is this cross that was exhibited here too, now belongs to the Vatican Museums and was presented in that year. The Vatican dates this in the early 20th, but actually it was made in 1892 to be sent to the Pope on the 50th anniversary of his episcopal ordination the following year. Fabier mentioned he was able to gradate colors in the same partition, and they started also to enamel in the round. They used not only cloisonné, but also en ronde-bosse technique. This is a very important achievement he mentioned. The quality is crazy. You can see also the gradation of colors, the different tints, the volumes. And this is a very intriguing group of figurines. It is dated in the 18th century, but in my opinion, it's quite difficult to maintain that early chronology. In regards to the patterns, the motifs, for example, that kind of stars, in my opinion, are quite difficult to find in the 18th century. I think it could be related to the Fabian-Deschênes collaboration. Also, Toussaint made similar groups of prophets like this engraving with Chinese inscriptions and neo-Baroque style. And I propose they could be related to a big monstrance, for example, or an architectural model, such as the Immaculate Column in Rome, made in the mid-19th century. You can notice the holes on the base. Maybe they were applied to a structure similar to that of the Immaculate Column in Rome. I think it's the most probable explanation of this weird and rare. It's so unique. I am not saying it's not interesting because we can change the chronology. In my opinion, chronology is not such as important. The important thing is that they were able to create these amazing objects. Okay, this is the transition to early Beitang. Beautiful items related to most lazaristes from the Netherlands, from Belgium. And finally, Beitang established a huge production in around the 20s. The first catalog was published in December 1915, and the last one in 1928. They were creating this kind of objects with modern approach to Art Deco sometimes, or Art Nouveau. They put the inscriptions in. This is one of the first sets presented to a European church. This is in the Sacré-Cœur, and it's mentioned in the catalog. So this is a kind of a commercial strategy to send to Europe some of the most important items. These chalices were also published in the catalog, and we can identify some of them just looking at the marks. Only the chalices are marked, and some specific items are marked with the inscription, the painted inscription on enamel. It's the Beitang worship. It was hard to find because, for example, there are in Avila, in Spain, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in France, in the States, in Italy. It's crazy, but little by little, it's possible to find at least one item of every of them in the catalog. In regards to the original context, some pictures allows us to propose that cloisonné was used both in historicism churches and Sino-Christian style churches. It's a versatile production. Again, Tao, at the beginning was Tao. This is a visual example of this. It's quite interesting. It's kept in Belgium, made in Beitang. We are approaching the end, excuse me. In regards to Sangwan, of course, you know that photo is so famous, a catalog published in 1928. I found a few objects, like that one in Paris, that basin with the mark of Sikaway or Tusegui. In the States, there are many host containers or pyxes connected to Merinol. Merinol love, I think, Merinol missionaries love to go to Sangwan. In Belgium, the candlestick, and in the Vatican and in several religious orders, they're kept this kind of crozier. And this is the end of the presentation in regards to Sino-Christian art in the 30s and 40s. Our colleague mentioned the paintings kept at the Ritchie, but we know also similar items inspired in old Chinese traditions, in the Tang, in the Middle Ages, such as the chalice and pattern presented to Marriott Sanin in 1938. Finally, Etienne Merveille reacted to this tradition and produced his own works in collaboration with native craftsmen. So we can reflect on technological exchange, cultural interactions between architecture, style, historicism, and cloisonné, changes of taste, of course. Cloisonné has a kind of soft power of the missions and the countries involved, and the easily movements of cloisonné all over the world. And of course, we can talk about the accommodation procedures that were used not only in textiles, not only in architecture, not only in investments, but only in this kind of, this tiny but important part of the material culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuela. Thank you. Thank you. Take a seat. Take a seat. I love your wonderful work of like finding these different from different collections and come together with this wonderful story. So I have one question. I mean, have you come across any like archival materials or any materials about how much these? I mean, for example, like a piece of them will cost. I mean,
yes,
or just like no.
yes.
I mean, in contemporary. I mean, back in the 20th century.
Yeah.
You know
It
how
was easy to find that information because it's on the catalogs.
it's in the
Both Peitang and Tushangwan published their own catalogs with the most important achievement of Peitang workshop was that they included photos, while Tushangwan just included engravings of the items. But both of them included the prices, the materials. You could order in silver or in copper or bronze even. You could order with less or more enamels, less or more gold. And you could also choose between the series of objects already done by the workshops, but you was also able to make special orders to the workshop. If you would like to include your coat of arms, for example,
I remember seeing the Tushangwan catalog. So I mean, they are kind of like organized according to size.
Yep.
So how much is that? I mean, they make it very clear, and then they have an order form. So it's like, but I think, I mean, for example, like Peitang, it would be.
Peitang catalog is not so detailed, but it's similar. They have the measures, they have the prices, of course, and several options in regards to the number of enamels. The important notice is that enamels were not quite expensive. Silver or reliefs in silver were more expensive than, for example, if you wanted to buy a chalice entirely made in silver, was more expensive than a chalice made entirely in cloisonné. Yeah. But the prices, I can easily show you the catalog. There are few copies of the catalog published by the Peitang. I found them. It is said one of them is kept in the National Library of China in Beijing, but it's difficult to access it. So I went to the mother house of the Lazarists in Paris, and they have two of them. The one published in 1925 and the last one published in 1928.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, any questions or any comments from our speakers and our audience?
You don't like cloisonné?
That's one at the back.
Dr. Manuel, thanks for your talk. You showed an interesting crucifix from Peitang earlier with the Tao Yin Yang, which you say was in Belgium. Can you talk a bit more about that? Does it have a name?
No, unfortunately, it's not. I think it's not a private commission. It's just part of the catalog. They offer several shapes of crucifixes. Some of them with the little sculpture of Jesus, some of them without it, just with enamels. But I found both the Tao and the Yin Yang, and also the symbols of the immortals. So we can ask ourselves if this is a kind of syncretism of just chinoiserie. In regards to the Yin Yang, I found several reflections of course, it has been said today, Tao is, in the origin was Tao, or Tao is the word when they were trying to explain, to translate the word preaching, they used Tao. I don't remember now the Chinese philosopher converted into Christianity who specialized in that issue. But yes, could be a kind of syncretism. Could be. It's not a museum, it's a religious institution. I think it is in the Scout missionaries close to Brussels, but please give me your email and I will check it for you. Yeah, I will check it. Thank you.
Is it on? We know that the popes and cardinals and bishops all wore a lot of jewelry. Did they wear cloisonné jewelry?
Sorry, I didn't understand. Could you rephrase it?
Okay, the popes and bishops and cardinals wore lots of jewelry. They wear rings and necklaces.
Ah, yes, yes. Not a lot of jewelry, but mainly pectoral crosses. Rings were not made in cloisonné. They use precious stones. I didn't find any example with cloisonné. No. They use also the crosser. They have several of them, but mainly they bought liturgical objects such as chalices, ciboria, cruets, basins, little bottles for the holy oils too, that kind of objects. But I will publish soon a book on that, and I will include all the typologies I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The images were incredible, especially these chalices. I'm trying to get my head around some of these early cloisonné, very highly detailed. Like, how many hours are we talking? How many craftsmen, for example, at the Tushanwan orphanage, are we talking about?
Yes, when studying the early workshops in Beijing, Fabien mentioned at least 6 people working at the same time in the process of cloisonné making, because they were quite specialized. For example, one person made the previous drawing, another one made the copper object, another one made the wires, and at the end, someone made the enamel. But it's difficult to make calculations. There is a lot of information about Tushanwan. Someone is speaking tomorrow, maybe, about Tushanwan. I am not so on the number of workers, but I think it's easy. It's not difficult to find that information in regards to Shanghai, but in regards to Peitang, Fabien just mentioned 6 people involved in a project, but I don't know the total number of workers, unfortunately. Yes, I think at the beginning, during the collaboration with Techeng workshop, they were few because it was a private workshop. And little by little, when it transformed in the Peitang official workshop, maybe it increased the number of workers. But I have no reference to the information. There are few letters in the Mother House of the Lazaris in Paris, but they don't mention the number of workers, unfortunately. Thank you.
Hi, Manuel. Thank you very much for this very intriguing lecture. I'm pretty much interested in the use of this iridescent turquoise color for cloisonné work. Did I understand it correctly? That was one of the major colors that used for 18th century cloisonné work and 19th century as well? Or there's another kind of a color like white. I have seen some of the, right? Yeah. I'm asking this because one of the scholars based in Paris, John Finlay, who is a Qing scholar, brought my attention to one of the golden or maybe gold vessels rooted from Yuan, but now kept in Fontainebleau in Paris. It's gold vessel, but originally was inlaid with a kingfisher feather. So with a comparable, iridescent color, very shining at the very beginning. So my I'm not sure about it. I want to know what you think about it, whether this kind of a color was a continuation or imitation of kingfisher feathers color, like turquoise. Because in the 19th century, when the technology or the technique of making cloisonné become more and more popular, hairpins made of cloisonné replaced kingfisher inlay. So I'm wondering whether there's something going on between the two techniques. Who is imitating whom, given the common interest in this kind of a turquoise color? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very, very interesting question. I have to say that turquoise blue was the traditional color of cloisonné from the beginning, from the João period, as, the cobalt blue in porcelain. So I'm not sure if there is a connection between featherwork and cloisonné. They were interested in blue in general, but in regards to cloisonné, Christian cloisonné, they started to make, as we have seen previously, objects in very traditional way, and little by little they started to include European or Western elements. And little by little they changed the background. The background was made first in blue, but later they preferred pink and white. And they replaced so complex and intricate motifs for simple, symbolic, more iconic elements in regards to the development of the Art Nouveau in Europe, or the symbolism in Europe, or the Art Deco too. They started to simplify everything. Yeah, I think it's related to trends, that's all. I'm not sure if it is a kind of symbolic approach. Maybe white is the color of purity, but I think it's just a question of taste, evolution. But till the end, they were making every kind of colors. And it's quite interesting that Fabia, in this revolution around the revival of medieval techniques in Europe and also in China, he said, and Jameter repeat this, he said that Chinese enamels are superior because they were able to make 11 colors, while in Europe they were only able to make 9 colors. Thank you.
So thank you, Manuela. I think it's also time for us to invite the speakers back onto the stage.
Great,
for
thank you very much,
panel.
gentlemen. Can I invite you to proceed to your right-hand side as we prepare the stage? So great, wonderful presentations on the impact of Christianity on Chinese material culture. We'll be having our speakers join us back on stage, so you can continue the questions as I invite our speakers, Dr. Maria João Ferreira, Curator of the Museo de Roque, Liu Heng as well, from Heidelberg University and EPHL PSL University, Dr. Guo Mo from Macau University of Science and Technology, and also Dr. Manuel to join us back as well. So, Kevin, over to you.
Great. So, after this, I think 4 wonderful presentations, we look at textiles, we look at buildings, we look at porcelain, and then we ended with cloisonné, looking at different types of material culture. I have to say, in this panel, we have a strong Portuguese element. We've got 3 speakers more related to Portugal and the influence, and especially with a focus on Macau. But any questions or any comments that you would have for each other's presentation, or any other additional questions from our audience? Yeah, both. I think William and Patricia. Yeah, Patricia first. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for your papers. This question is inspired by Manuel's last comment about cloisonné, the technique of cloisonné as being more advanced than what was available to be done in Europe. So this is actually taking that point, and then I was thinking about Maria's talk about textiles and then Guo's talk on porcelain. I wonder, because you both address so much the surface ornamentation, the religious iconography of these works, which makes sense for the context of the conference that we are in. I wonder if we could say more about their materiality, to think about these objects, perhaps in some ways not just focusing on the religious element, but as luxury goods in the global market, and how that might relate to Portugal's imperial expansion, because we've used the very neutral language of early modern period, but this is also a period of great imperialism and colonial expansion as well. So if you could just talk a little bit more about that, thank you.
I can start. Well, exactly. The presentation I made here was regarding especially Christianity and its role in Chinese contexts. But in fact, what I think is the materiality is one of the main aspects that is considered, appreciated, praised in the European context, in Portugal namely, when you find the descriptions of the presence of mentioning the presence of Chinese textiles in religious ceremonial events. I was telling someone, usually they mention basically this, the novelty of the motifs, because they are totally different from even the flowers, although Europe, but they are totally different and much more vivid and intense chromatically. So the novelty of the motifs, and the originality of the sophistication of materials, obviously. We're talking about silk and gold. A very light gold when compared to the European gold. If you try one of these pieces and try one typical European vestment, they're totally different. One you fall with the weight, and with this they are very, very light. So this make all the difference. They turn even more not only practical in their daily use, because these pieces were used, in fact, they were not just taken. So you have this materiality. You have also the mentioning that they come from China. And in one case, we were talking about the biggest 1729, and they say, you only need to say that they come from China, and everything is told. So you have really this information and this perspective that these objects, that is why they are so requested, they represent the Portuguese enterprise, the Portuguese power with its access to Macau. We must remember that until 1685, Macau was the only an exclusive European port. So it mentioned a lot. It meant a lot for these pieces. They weren't just, I think the rest is basically losing the way. So yes, indeed, you mentioned all these aspects that are very, very important, I think. Thank you.
So my study, there's another aspect that is very interesting, is between the difference, the difference between the Portuguese faience and Chinese porcelain. So the Portuguese people, they were the first European to have this commercial trade with Chinese people, and so the secret of Chinese porcelain was discovered in the early of 18th century. But because of the high need of China for looking for Chinese porcelain, so the Portuguese people, they wanted to produce their own Chinese porcelain, but they did produce is faience. So what's the difference between the faience and the porcelain is the name is 白墩子. And it's the material and the temperature. So they wanted to copy the elements, the symbols, but what they do produced is faience. So this also related to the material and this kind of things.
May I just add that in the case of faience, in 1580s, the Lisbon factories started to produce exactly this, copying this fake porcelain that was exported to other places in Europe. So it was also a chance of market as well, once again. So.
And it's interesting to notice that from a commercial strategy, missionary catalogs mention we have shown this kind of objects to the most important European makers, and they were stunned because of the quality of technique, the colors, and blah, blah, blah. It's a commonplace to say this is Chinese labor, it's so detailed, it's so specialized, it's a fantastic achievement.
I have a methodological question, and it's sort of applied to the three talks about objects, but I think a little bit about the Macau sort of gate as well. I think just a quick comment from Manuel, thinking about the sort of smooth transition from colors, which is interesting that you mentioned as one innovation, because that's exactly what the Japanese clothing industry is also claiming. It's also a different type of effect in the Meiji period. So I wonder if there is actually sort of more of a connection between that and the Japanese clothing industry, which become incredibly famous at the same time. But just in general, I think most of the papers focus a lot about origin, right? Whether it's very specific workshop places, the motivation for what they're thinking about, and coming from China, but even further, perhaps even like a specific place in China. But with sort of these sort of objects of exchange, with material culture and approaching it from material culture, things change meaning. There are different lives of these objects. They change in different time periods. And this is also with the larger field of cultural studies, material cultural studies. They shifted more to sort of reception, right? How are these objects interpreted in a museum context, in the context of domestic, gender, all of that, right? So I wonder if you can sort of comment on sort of in terms of approach of mythology, because thinking about the slides, everyone is so clear about this is from this place. This is made by this, right? Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes it's from different places, one object, right? So yeah, if you can sort of comment on that.
Thank you. I think it's quite intriguing. I totally agree with you. Life of objects is one of the key questions. For example, in regards to cloisonné, some of them were conceived as a memento. So the priests, the missionaries who worked in China took the objects with them as a part of their autobiography. It's quite interesting because they also collaborated making them, and it's part of their lives. They, of course, had a practical use. Some of them were Chinese inscriptions, for example, the cruets for water and wine, in order to identify the function of both of them. Some of them, as I mentioned, are a kind of material proof or a kind of part of soft power in regards to the achievements of the Christian missions in China and in regards to the competition between Jesuits and Lazarettes, because they don't mention actually that, but it's under everything. You can identify the tensions between them, because also in the catalogs they are always mentioning, oh, this is the achievement of the mission of this point, directed by me or by my colleagues, and my order is the most important because we are able to make these kind of objects. And finally, of course, the objects are a kind of, I don't know if exotica, if the correct word, but a kind of precious thing, mainly when coming back to Europe. It's so rare, so precious. And we cannot forget, most of them not were export objects. They were used also by local Christian communities, by converts, by native priests. But I would like to deepen on the native or the Chinese converts texts. I found just a few lines of that kind of reflections. For example, in some of the first bishops in the 20s, I don't remember, in 1922, the 6 first native bishops, they also reflected on that kind of things. Because we are Chinese, we can use also Sino-Christian objects and so on. So, of course, life of objects and the audience or the people involved is quite interesting. Thank you, William.
Well, when you say that we said everything, no, I don't know. And as I mentioned, I don't know where they were made and how they were made. And these objects I showed you are the ones that are more consistent. But I have many others in fewer quantity that pose lots of questions, as you were saying, because they travel, these objects travel with the people, because every time they travel, they stay there and they keep. So a new journey starts with these objects. One of the ways I've been trying to figure out, it's not a matter of having to know specifically where they're made. It is precisely the challenge to understand how this was organized and the process, the many lives these objects had, and the many geographies for which they passed that we can try to understand through the subtle differences that we find somehow in iconographic or in material approaches that we find. And we have objects I've been trying to understand, for example, through dye analysis. And they have been helpful to corroborating what I think. Some of the, for example, there is a typology that I didn't show because it's a common, it's not with liturgical for church services. That, for example, it is in Portugal. That it departs from the panel structure of Chinese elements with the animals around and peonies alternated, and a big peony, center peony and phoenix, a pair of fengguang. It is typically Chinese for trade, for export. But then you have one in Portugal, for example, that's, yes, you look at that, it reminds you, but there's something totally different. The technique is different, materials are different, and the dyes are different. And they point precisely to Europe, because to Iberian Peninsula. It has a specific lichen that only exists there. So it attests it's also important to see how these pieces influence other productions, namely in Portugal. We mustn't forget that besides pieces, we had craftsmen that were taken to Portugal in ivory, in embroidery. So it's a total mixture. It's a total puzzle. And I love it for that, but I don't know where they were made. Definitely not.
Okay, so thank you, thank you for wonderful speakers, and thank you for the our wonderful audience as well. So yeah, this is the end of today's program, and tomorrow we'll have another 2 panels. First on Tushanwan, and second about more recent development in Catholic Christian art in China. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much to our panelists. Can we take a group photo first? Can we invite you to stand up? We'll just take a very quick shot. To our audience members, we got a QR code. If you can please help us with a feedback, we greatly appreciate that. We'll flash it very shortly after this photograph. Now, once again, the second panel, the influence of Christianity on Chinese material. So we got Dr. Maria Ferreira, Liu Heng, Dr. Cuomo, and also Dr. Manuel, and also our moderator, Kevin, as well. Thank you very much.